the ocean at night swallows everything. On land, there's always noise. Cars, bars, voices, music, something. Out here, 20 miles offshore, there was only black water and a sky so packed with stars it felt like we'd fallen out of the world entirely. The engine hummed steady, and every so often the boat creaked, but otherwise the night was too quiet. Jake raised his beer, grinning that crooked grin of his. To my last night of freedom, may my bride never find out how ugly the ocean makes me look. We all laughed, the sound bouncing across the deck and disappearing into the open water. It was his bachelor party, though not the kind most people would imagine. No Vegas strip clubs, no drunken karaoke. Jake didn't want that. He wanted one last trip with his closest friends, a boatload of beer, rods in the water, and nothing but sea on all sides. So we gave him that. Pete, the oldest of us, shook his head with a snort. He was leaning against the rail, cigarette dangling from his lips. Christ, Jake, you ain't even married yet and you're already wishing she don't know things. That's the point, Pete, Jake shot back. He slapped Aaron, his younger brother, on the shoulder and winked. A little mystery keeps the romance alive. Aaron groaned, rolling his eyes. That's your marriage advice? Lying? Jake slung an arm around him, grinning. Nah, my advice is simple. Don't get caught. Sam nearly spit his drink out laughing. I just leaned against the opposite rail, smiling quietly. That was Jake, loud, always performing, but it worked. He had this way of dragging the rest of us into his orbit, making us forget everything else. In 2 weeks he'd be saying vows. Tonight, he was the center of the universe. We didn't know it'd be his last. The first few hours were nothing but beer, lines, and stories. Pete told us about the time his motor died 5 miles out, and he had to row back with nothing but a busted oar and pure stubbornness. Aaron tried to outdo him with a tale about sneaking into Jake's high school prom after-party and nearly getting arrested. Jake cut in halfway through and corrected every detail, making himself look twice as wild and Aaron twice as stupid. Sam swore he'd once hooked a grouper so big it snapped his rod. Nobody believed him, but Jake made him retell it twice just for laughs. The rods barely twitched, not a bite worth mentioning. But it didn't matter. The night air was cool and salty, the beer was flowing, and Jake was in his element. All right, he announced around midnight. New bachelor party rule. Confessions. Everyone's got to tell one thing they've done on a trip like this that their girl doesn't know about. Pete grumbled. My wife knows everything before I do it. She probably knows I'm out here right now drinking this beer. Aaron shook his head. Not playing? Yes, you are, Jake said, pointing with his bottle. Bachelor rules. Sam scratched his chin, cheeks red. I kissed a bridesmaid at a wedding once. Jake whooped, clapping him on the back. That's what I'm talking about. Pete, you're up. Pete just chuckled and lit another cigarette. Only secret I got is how much bait I waste. And she already knows that. Everyone laughed. Jake finally pointed at me. What about you? I raised my beer. I plead the fifth. The guys booed. Jake leaned close, grinning. Fine, keep your secrets. But when I go down the aisle, I expect you to tell me at least one thing I shouldn't know. I smiled back, but inside something twisted. Looking at Jake then, loud, alive, leaning into the future, I couldn't imagine he wouldn't make it home. Around 2 a.m., the mood shifted. The jokes had slowed. The lines were slack. Half the cooler was empty. Pete had dozed off in his chair, cigarette dangling dangerously close to his shirt. The engine hummed steady. The sea stretched out flat and black. Then the radio crackled. It wasn't the soft hiss of interference. It was sharp, jagged, like something was forcing its way through the static. We all froze. Quest? Help? Anyone? Jake sat up straight, frowning. The hell was that? Pete stirred awake instantly, cigarette dropping to the deck. His head snapped toward the cabin. That was a distress call. Aaron snorted nervously. Gone. Probably some old frequency bouncing around. Prank or something. But no one was laughing. The radio crackled again. Ship in distress. Coordinates? Please. help us." The voice was faint but clear, desperate. Then silence. The deck went dead quiet. Sam swallowed hard. That didn't sound fake. Jake tried to laugh, but it came out too thin. "Great. So we're about to be heroes, huh? Save a cruise ship and I get free upgrades for life?" Pete didn't smile. He was already moving to the cabin, adjusting dials. His brow furrowed deep. That wasn't close. Whoever it was, they're miles out. And it didn't sound recent. "What do you mean, not recent?" Aaron asked. Pete didn't answer. That's when I saw it, a faint glimmer on the horizon. "Hey," I whispered, pointing. The others turned. At first, it looked like a star. But it was too low, too steady. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. "Ship," Pete said. His voice was flat. Jake squinted. "Middle of the night? This far out? Why?" No one answered. Pete killed the engine. The sudden silence rang in my ears. Without the motor, we could hear the creak of the hull, the hiss of waves against the bow. The radio hissed again. The same voice. "God, please, help us, coordinates?" Then static. Then silence. We stared at one another, the weight of the ocean pressing in. Jake finally raised his beer, though his hand trembled. "Guess the bachelor party just got interesting." The grin didn't reach his eyes. And the light on the horizon burned steady. Waiting. The light grew larger with every mile we closed. At first it had been a distant star pinned to the horizon. Now it was a towering shadow against the sea, its bulk blotting out the starlight, its angles jagged and wrong. It rose out of the water like something dredged up from the deep, a mountain of black steel streaked with rust that gleamed faintly in the moonlight. We drifted close enough to read the faded letters across its hull. "Maribelle," Pete said, his voice tight. The name struck something in me, though I couldn't say what. Jake leaned on the rail, squinting. "Pretty name for a floating graveyard." Pete didn't smile. He rubbed at his jaw, eyes locked on the letters. "I've heard that name before. My old man. He used to talk about her. Said the Maribelle was a freighter that went missing in the 70s. Whole crew gone. No wreckage, no radio. Just disappeared." Aaron barked a laugh, too loud, too forced. "So what? It sank and somebody slapped the name on a new one." Pete shook his head slowly. "That ain't a new coat of paint. That's the same ship." A silence fell over us. The radio in the cabin hissed again, the same desperate voice breaking through the static. "Maribelle, ship in distress. Please." We all turned to stare at the freighter. The lamp on its upper deck burned steady, as if answering the call. Jake broke the silence, forcing a grin. "All right, boys, change of plans. The bachelor party's officially upgrading to a cruise." "Don't joke," Aaron snapped. "This isn't funny." Jake slapped him on the back. "Relax, little bro. It's just a boat. Look at it. No one's home. Maybe we'll find some cool junk and call it a night." Sam's grip tightened on the oar he'd been holding since the radio first hissed. "Or maybe we'll find out why no one ever came home." Pete grunted. "We board. We don't stay long. Get a look, make sure no one's aboard, then we go." Jake raised his beer. "You heard the captain." He winked. "Best bachelor party story ever." But his grin didn't reach his eyes. The Maribelle loomed over us as we tied off. Up close, the scale was staggering. Our little fishing boat looked like a toy next to it. The hull was scarred with streaks of rust and salt, but the steel beneath felt solid. Too solid. 50 years at sea should have torn it apart, but this ship looked ready to sail tomorrow. The smell hit us as we edged closer. Salt, oil, and something sour. Something metallic. Pete climbed first. Boots clanging against the ladder bolted into the hull. Jake followed, laughing nervously. Boys' night out just went deluxe. Aaron cursed but climbed after him, muttering about how insane this was. Sam hesitated, clutching his oar, then sighed and hauled himself up. I went last, harpoon tight in my grip. The ladder was slick, the steel cold under my hands. When I hauled myself onto the deck, the first thing that hit me was the silence. No gulls, no waves slapping the hull, even the wind had died. Just the five of us standing on a deck frozen in time. A lifeboat hung from its davits nearby, half lowered, swaying gently. The ropes should have rotted long ago, but they were taut and clean like they'd been tied yesterday. The railings were straight, unbent, the deck coated in a thin crust of salt that crunched under our boots. Aaron bent down, touching a coil of rope. It was soft, pliable. His face went pale. "This isn't possible." "Nothing about this is possible," Pete muttered. Jake forced a laugh. "Guess we found the fountain of youth. Somebody bottle this salt air, we'll be rich." No one laughed with him. We made our way to the first door. Pete pushed it open, the hinges groaning. Inside was the mess hall. Long tables stretched in perfect rows, each one set with plates, cups, silverware. Salt crusted their surfaces, but the arrangement was too neat. Chairs tucked in, knives and forks aligned. Sam whispered, "It's like they just walked away." Jake picked up a spoon, spinning it between his fingers. It shone, gleaming like new. "Knock it off," Pete barked. Jake set it down quickly, his grin faltering. We moved deeper. Cabins lined both sides of the corridor. Inside, the bunks were perfectly made, blankets tucked tight. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else. Something sweet, almost like rotting fruit. Aaron stopped at one bunk. He touched the sheet, then jerked his hand back. "It's warm." We froze. Pete frowned. "No, it ain't." He touched it himself. His face hardened, but he didn't say more. We kept moving. An office sat further down. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, pens resting beside them. A logbook lay open, its ink faded but legible. Pete flipped through it. The entries were dated 1974. Shipments, weather notes, maintenance logs. The last line was scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Lights on the water again. Crew restless. Avoiding the hold." The rest of the page was blank. Pete snapped the book shut, jaw tight. Jake, trying to break the tension, spread his arms. "Gentlemen, I give you the perfect bachelor pad." No one spoke. The air grew heavier the deeper we went. Every step echoed too loud, bouncing down the halls. We passed a storage room where tools hung on the wall in perfect rows, gleaming faintly under our flashlights. Hammers, wrenches, axes. None rusted, none out of place. Aaron muttered, "It's like someone's still here." Jake chuckled, but his voice was tight. "Yeah? Then where are they?" The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then the radio crackled. The sound echoed faintly from somewhere above. The bridge. "Ship in distress. This is the Maribelle. Please, anyone." The voice was clearer now, sharp, desperate. We froze. Pete whispered, "Not possible." The voice continued, rising in panic. "Immediate assistance. Can't. Hold." Then it cut out. The silence afterward felt alive. Jake gripped his boat hook like a weapon, his grin stretched too thin. "All right, boys, this just became the best bachelor party in history." But even he didn't believe it anymore. The ship felt endless. Every corridor looked the same. Steel walls streaked with rust, pipes groaning faintly overhead, bulkhead doors that opened into rooms too neat, too untouched. It didn't feel like we were exploring a wreck. It felt like we'd stepped into a memory. Pete led with the flashlight, every movement cautious, controlled. Jake kept close, his grin fading by the minute, though he still clutched the boat hook like he might swing it if something jumped. Aaron whispered curses under his breath, muttering about how insane this was, while Sam's knuckles had gone white around his oar. I carried the harpoon like a lifeline, feeling its weight anchor me to reality. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The air felt damp, heavy with the stink of copper and salt. The galley was our first stop. Counters gleamed under a thin crust of salt. Pots and pans hung in perfect rows, polished to a shine. A stove squatted in the corner, spotless, as if no one had ever used it. Jake tapped one of the pots with the hook. The clang echoed down the corridor, too sharp, too long. He flinched at the sound. Guess the chef's on break. Aaron snapped, "Stop joking." But Jake's eyes lingered on the counter, like he half expected food to appear. Pete crouched near a drain in the floor. His fingers came back wet. He sniffed once, then recoiled. Not water. No one asked what it was. The engine room was worse. Massive machines filled the chamber, pipes winding like veins, pistons looming overhead. They weren't rusted shut. They gleamed faintly, as if someone had polished them yesterday. Chains dangled from the ceiling, swaying gently. No draft stirred the air. Sam whispered, "Do you hear that?" We froze. There, faint, deliberate, footsteps. Slow, steady, from somewhere deeper in the chamber. Jake called out too loudly, "Hello?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then clang. A chain rattled overhead. Another joined it, the sound spreading across the ceiling like something crawling above us. Aaron grabbed my arm. His skin was ice. "We need to go." But Pete's light caught something. A locker half open, a nameplate hanging loose. He pulled it wider. Inside was a navy blue uniform, pressed, hanging straight. A cap sat on the shelf, insignia gleaming. In the pocket was a photo. 5 men, arms slung around each other, grinning. Standing on this deck. The date scribbled on the back, 1974. Pete slid it back with a trembling hand and shut the locker. Jake's grin faltered completely. The corridors beyond the engine room felt different. Narrower, damp, like we'd stepped into a tunnel. Water dripped from unseen pipes. Every footstep echoed too loud, bouncing back as if someone else followed us a step behind. Sam froze suddenly, holding up a hand. "Shh." We listened. Tap, tap, tap. Footsteps again. Slow, measured. Jake whispered, "Somebody's here." Pete's reply was flat. Or something. Halfway down the corridor, a door slammed shut. We all jumped. Aaron cursed, fumbling his flashlight. Pete rushed forward, yanking the door open. The room was empty, but the sheets on the bunk inside were still rippling, as if someone had just gotten up. Jake stumbled back, swearing. Sam muttered, "I told you, this place isn't empty." The corridor behind us creaked. We spun. Empty. But for a moment, I swore I saw a shadow slide out of sight. The deeper we went, the more the ship twisted. Corridors bent at impossible angles. We passed the same red toolbox 3 times, though Pete swore we'd been moving forward. Aaron's voice cracked, "We're going in circles." "No," Pete muttered, jaw tight. "It just looks the same." But when Sam ran his hand along the wall, his fingers came away marked with the same smear of grease he'd left minutes earlier. It wasn't just déjà vu. We were looping. That was when we lost Aaron. 1 second he was behind me, muttering. The next, his light bobbed around the corner too fast. "Aaron!" I shouted, heart seizing. We ran after him, boots pounding. The corridor bent sharply, then opened into a small storage room. Empty. No Aaron. Just shelves lined with tools, each one gleaming as if brand new. Jake's voice broke. "Aaron!" A faint echo came from somewhere deeper in the ship. "Over here." His voice, calm, too calm. We froze. Pete hissed. That didn't come from him. Jake started forward, but Pete shoved an arm out. "No, that wasn't him." The echo repeated. "Over here. Farther away now." Sam whispered, "It's luring us." We backed out of the room slowly, not daring to turn our backs. When we regrouped, Aaron stumbled into the light from the other side of the corridor, pale, shaking. I just turned around," he stammered. "Thought I saw something." Jake grabbed his shoulders. "Don't wander off." "Jesus, Aaron." But I couldn't shake it. That voice hadn't come from Aaron. At last, we reached the bridge. The radio hissed softly, static filling the dark. Pete stepped inside first, scanning the consoles. Every gauge, every dial was intact. Too intact. Then the radio sparked to life. "Ship in distress. This is the Maribelle. Please, anyone." The voice was sharp, desperate. But the microphone was already depressed. As if an invisible hand was holding it down. Jake whispered, "Oh, hell no." Aaron grabbed his arm. "We're leaving, we've seen enough." Pete's eyes were fixed on the radio, his face pale. That voice, it sounded... He trailed off. Before we could ask, the consoles flickered. Needles twitched. Lights blinked. The wheel creaked as it turned itself. And a deep vibration hummed through the floor. The Maribelle was waking up. The hum in the bridge didn't stop. It filled the metal floor, rattled the consoles, thrummed in our bones. The Maribelle wasn't just a ship anymore. It was awake. Pete yanked the microphone out of its cradle. For a moment the static cut, but then it roared back, sharper, louder, until a broken voice cut through. "Crew, can't, hold, lights in the water." The words hung in the air like frost. Jake's grin collapsed completely. "Lights in the water? What the hell does that mean?" The wheel groaned, turning a fraction on its own. The deck vibrated under our feet. Aaron staggered back, shaking his head. "Nope, no, we're done here." He reached for the door, but it had swung shut. He yanked at the handle, muscles straining. Nothing. Jake threw himself at it, shoulders slamming into steel again and again. Each hit rang through the bridge, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the hum. Sam whispered, "It doesn't want us to leave." Pete snapped, "Don't say that." His voice cracked on the last word. The door finally clicked. On its own. It swung open with a long metallic creak, as though the ship had decided we could go. No one moved at first. Then Pete took a shaky breath. "Stay close. Don't separate, no matter what." We filed back into the corridor. The air had changed. Before, it had been damp, salty. Now it was sharp and cold, every breath steaming in the beam of our flashlights. The shadows stretched longer. Our boots rang louder. And then we weren't alone. At first it was just a flicker at the edge of vision, a blur of movement. The hair on the back of my neck rose. Then Sam gasped. At the far end of the corridor, a man stood. He wore a navy blue uniform, cap perched square on his head, but his face, it wasn't right. The features blurred, dripping like wet paint. His eyes were deep pits, black and bottomless. Jake raised the boathook, voice cracking. "Hey, who the hell are you?" The man didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even breathe. He just tilted his head, slow and stiff, as if studying us. The light flickered, and he was gone. Aaron snapped, "Nope, I'm not doing this." He shoved past us, bolting down the corridor. "Wait," Pete barked, but Aaron's flashlight bobbed around a corner too fast. We sprinted after him, our footsteps hammering through the ship. When we turned the corner, empty. No Aaron. Just silence. And on the wall, a handprint. Wet, rust-colored, dripping. Sam gagged. "That's blood." Pete touched it, jaw tightening. The smear was still fresh. "Together," he said through gritted teeth. "We stick together." We moved as one, every shadow a threat. The corridor led us into the crew quarters. Rows of bunks stretched wall to wall, each bed neatly made, blankets tucked in with military precision. The smell hit us instantly. Mildew, sweat, and something sweet and rotten, like spoiled fruit. Jake muttered, "This isn't right, this isn't right." Then he froze. One of the bunks was occupied. A man lay on top of the blanket, hands folded across his chest, uniform crisp, cap resting beside him. His skin was pale as wax. His lips tinged blue. But his eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Pete edged forward, flashlight trembling in his grip. The man's chest rose. A long, ragged inhale. Then it fell again, and he went still. Pete staggered back, shaking his head. We left the room fast, hearts pounding. The corridor outside was darker than before. Our lights cut only short beams, the shadows crowding closer. That's when we heard it. Laughter. Soft, low, floating down the hall. It wasn't loud or mocking. It was calm, steady, the sound of men sharing a private joke. Jake's voice cracked. "Who's there?" The laughter stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse, because it was filled with breathing. Slow, heavy, right in front of us. I swung the harpoon wildly into the dark. The steel rang off the wall. Nothing there. But the air in front of us steamed, as if someone else stood inches away, exhaling in our faces. We stumbled toward the stairwell. The doors there were sealed tight. Pete tried the latch, straining. Nothing. Behind us, footsteps began. Slow, deliberate. Coming closer. Jake's hands shook as he lifted the boat hook. "Stay back, you hear me?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, right in our ears. Lights in the water. Aaron's flashlight flickered back on suddenly. He was behind us again, pale, eyes wide. I don't know what happened. I turned a corner and I was somewhere else. I swear I heard you calling me. But none of us had called his name. And the voice that whispered a moment ago hadn't been his. We finally forced the stairwell door open. The metal groaned and the chill air rushed past us like the ship exhaling. Pete's voice was low, shaking. "The crew's still here." Sam shook his head violently. "No, not here, not alive." And I wished Sam was wrong. Because I could feel them. Watching. Following. And waiting for us to go deeper. The stairwell twisted tighter the deeper we went. The hum of the Maribelle grew heavier, pressing into our bones, until it felt like the ship itself was breathing. Slow, steady, patient. Every step groaned under our boots. The air thickened, stinking of salt, rust, and something fouler. Copper, rot. The scent of blood long dried and freshly spilled all at once. Pete's voice cut through the dark. "Stay close. No matter what, no one falls behind." No one argued. At the bottom waited a door unlike the others. Massive steel, rust streaks dripping like veins. Stenciled letters half faded across its surface. "Cargo hold." Pete pressed his shoulder to it. Metal shrieked, the hinges gave, and the door swung open with a groan that echoed forever. The stench hit us first. Then the silence. The hold was a cathedral of steel and shadow. Rows of shipping containers towered 3 high, stretching into darkness. Chains dangled from the ceiling, clinking faintly as though stirred by an unseen wind. Pools of seawater glistened across the floor, though no waves rocked the ship. Our flashlights sliced narrow beams into the cavern, barely touching the enormity of it. Jake muttered, "Jesus, it's bigger than a stadium." His voice trembled, his humor running thin. We stepped inside. Our boots splashed softly, every sound amplified. Pete swept his light across the nearest container. Its doors were bent outward, warped, twisted. Long, jagged gouges scored the steel, like something with claws had torn its way free. Aaron choked. That's not from tools." Inside, the container was empty. Only more gouges along the walls, deep enough to leave curls of peeled metal. Sam whispered, "Something was in there." The silence after his words was worse than noise. We checked another container. This one wasn't empty. A chair sat bolted to the floor inside, restraints dangling loose from its arms. The leather straps were shredded, frayed as if something had pulled against them until they snapped. Beside it lay a boot, still upright, still polished, as though its owner had simply stepped out of it and never returned. Aaron backed away, shaking his head. "This is wrong, this whole thing." Jake cut him off with a sharp laugh. "What, you think they kept monsters in here? Come, it's just a—" But then he stopped. Because his flashlight had landed on another container. And inside sat a body. It slumped against the wall, skin drawn tight over bone. Salt crusted its clothes. But its eyes were wet, glossy, alive. And they were looking at us. Aaron swore violently, stumbling back. Pete stepped forward, his face pale. "It's preserved, somehow." The corpse's lips trembled. A rasp escaped, a breath, then silence. Jake swung the boat hook, slamming the container door shut with a crash. The sound echoed too long, reverberating until it felt like the entire hold was humming with it. When the echo faded, the corpse's eyes still glistened in the dark, watching us. We pushed deeper, nerves fraying with every step. More containers stood open, some empty, their walls shredded with gouges. Others filled with remnants, uniforms folded neatly, photographs tucked into corners, tools arranged with impossible precision. Sam picked up a photo, his hand trembling. It showed a group of sailors, smiling with their arms around each other. On the back, faded ink scrawled a date, 1974. The same year the Maribelle had vanished. Sam dropped it instantly. At the center of the hold, the containers ended. The floor spread wide, bare but for the crew. Dozens of them. Uniforms intact, caps resting askew. Bodies sprawled in neat rows across the steel floor. Some looked decades gone, gray and skeletal. Others looked almost fresh, lips cracked, skin pale but unbroken. One twitched as we passed. A finger curled. A chest rose, then fell still. Jake whispered, "They're alive." Pete shook his head hard. "No, they're not." But his voice wavered. The hum deepened suddenly, vibrating through the deck. The bodies stirred. Not all at once. First a hand here, then a head rolling, then eyes opening, too wide, gleaming faintly in our lights. Sam screamed, swinging the oar. Wood cracked against brittle bone, snapping a jaw loose. The figure didn't fall. It only reached for him, fingers jerking open and closed like claws. We bolted, stumbling between the rows. The bodies rose slowly, jerkily, as though fighting invisible strings. But there were too many. Too many eyes. Too many hands. Aaron cried out. One had him, its grip dug deep into his arm, skin splitting beneath its fingers. He screamed as blood slicked down his sleeve. Pete lunged, smashing his flashlight into its face. The skull cracked, collapsing inward. The grip loosened, and Aaron tore free, sobbing. We dragged him, boots slipping in the pools of brine. Jake swung his boat hook wildly, breaking ribs, shoving figures aside. For once, there was no grin on his face. Only terror. At the far end of the hold hung a wall of chains. They swayed, clinking, though no wind stirred. Some ended in hooks, others in restraints. A few dangled loose, their ends frayed, as if something had torn free. And behind them stood a container unlike the rest. Massive. Its doors were buckled outward, warped, bent as if something had forced its way out from the inside. Scrawled across the steel in jagged gouges, deep into the metal itself, were words that made my blood freeze. Lights in the water. The hum surged, deafening now. The chains rattled violently, filling the air with the sound of bone clattering. And beneath that sound came whispers. Not one, dozens, hundreds. A chorus of voices, layered and broken, spilling from every wall, every container, every figure rising to its feet. We never left. The water called us. Join us, join us. The lights flickered. Our beams sputtered. For a heartbeat, the hold went black. And when the light returned, everybody was standing. Dozens of sailors, faces slack, eyes black, swaying gently as if waiting for a command. Jake's voice broke into a scream. Run! We didn't need telling twice. We sprinted, boots slipping, hearts pounding. The figures didn't chase fast. They didn't need to. The hum pulsed with every step, a heartbeat pressing us forward, deeper into the maze of steel. Behind us, the whispers rose into a single word, echoing in unison from every mouth, every wall, every chain. Join. The hold erupted. Chains rattled like thunder. Voices swelled into a single roar. Join. Figures lurched forward, their boots scraping steel, arms outstretched. Their movements were jerky, wrong, like puppets pulled by 100 tangled strings. But there were too many. A wall of uniforms and pale faces closing in. Pete bellowed, "Move!" We bolted, slipping on brine-slick steel. The container walls blurred as we sprinted past, whispers nipping at our ears. Every shadow looked alive. Sam swung his oar wildly, cracking ribs, shoving figures aside. Aaron stumbled, clutching his bleeding arm, teeth gritted against the pain. Jake led the charge, boat hook raised, his usual grin replaced with a snarl of sheer terror. We hit the stairwell door. It slammed shut before we could reach it. Pete hurled himself against it, flashlight clattering to the floor. "Help me!" Jake dropped the hook long enough to slam his shoulder against the steel. The impact rang through the hold, but the door held firm. Behind us, the crew advanced, silent now. Only the hum filled the air, steady as a pulse. Sam sobbed, raising the oar again. "We're not getting out." The door clicked, then creaked open, slow and deliberate, as if the ship was allowing it. We didn't hesitate. We shoved through, dragging Aaron between us, Jake scooping his boat hook back up as we barreled up the stairs. The stairwell seemed longer than before, stretching upward endlessly. Our lights flickered, shadows flickered with them, stretching like hands reaching down toward us. Halfway up, Jake stumbled. A pale hand shot between the railings, grabbing his ankle. He screamed, kicking, the boat hook clattering down the steps. Figures surged below, climbing over each other, arms jerking upward. Pete and I hauled Jake up, Aaron screaming encouragement through clenched teeth. Sam swung the oar like a madman, smashing hands until bones cracked. We pulled Jake free just as the figures swarmed the bottom of the stairwell. The hum rose to a shriek. We burst onto the deck. The night sky stretched wide, stars brilliant, the sea unnervingly calm. But the Maribelle's deck was alive with shadows. Dozens of figures stood in formation along the rails, watching us with hollow eyes. Aaron gasped, clutching his arm. "Where's the boat?" Our fishing boat was still tied where we'd left it, but the ropes looked frayed now, half unraveled, as though the ship itself had tried to pull it free. Pete snarled, "Go." We sprinted, figures shifting to block our path. Jake swung his boat hook, screaming, "Out of my way!" He smashed into the first sailor, splitting its jaw. It didn't fall. It only grabbed the hook, holding it fast. Jake yanked, but the figure didn't let go. More closed in around him. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them." "No," Aaron roared, voice breaking. He lunged for Jake's arm, but Pete shoved him hard toward the boat. "Move, damn it." Jake's eyes met mine for a heartbeat. There was no grin, just a fierce, desperate plea. "Don't waste this." The crew swarmed him, dragging him back toward the shadows. His scream echoed across the deck, then cut off. Aaron collapsed, sobbing, as we shoved him into the fishing boat. Sam untied the ropes with shaking hands, Pete jamming the throttle forward. The motor roared. The Maribelle loomed above, its deck lined with still figures, their heads tilting in unison as they watched us drift away. None moved. None followed. But their whispers carried across the water, faint but clear. "Join us, join us, join us." We didn't stop until dawn. The horizon burned with light, the sea turning gold. The Maribelle was gone. No hulking shadow behind us. No lamp on the horizon. Just water. When we finally reached shore, the Coast Guard didn't believe us. They listened, brows furrowed, trading skeptical looks. They searched the coordinates Pete gave them. Nothing. No ship. No wreck. No evidence. They wrote it down as a psychological event. Exhaustion, alcohol, group hysteria. But I know what I saw. I can still smell the brine and rot. I can still hear the hum in my bones. And I can still see Jake's face, swallowed by pale hands. Weeks later, when I tried to sleep, I heard it again. The radio. Static. Then Jake's voice. "Ship in distress. This is the Maribelle." And sometimes, when I wake in the night, I swear I see lights on the water, waiting,